realize someone had been inside my house until I noticed the shower curtain. That sounds small, but when you live somewhere long enough, you know exactly how little things are supposed to look. I lived in that house with my parents, and when this happened, they were out of town for 3 days visiting relatives. I stayed behind because I had work. I was 19, and I had been home alone before, so none of that bothered me. The house itself was old, but not creepy old. It was a one-story place with a finished basement, a narrow hallway, and an attic space above the bedrooms. My dad used the attic for storage, but you could only get into it through a square hatch in the ceiling of my bedroom closet. He kept a folding ladder in the garage. By the second night of being alone, I had settled into a routine. I got home from work around 9:30, locked the doors, fed the dog, and watched TV until I got tired. That night, I took a shower before midnight. I always pulled the curtain closed after I got out. When I woke up the next morning, the curtain was open. Not halfway. Not like it had fallen back on its own. Fully pushed to one side. I knew I had closed it. Still, I told myself I must have been tired and forgotten. The rest of the day felt normal. I left for class, came home in the afternoon, and spent a couple hours in my room before going out again for my evening shift. Then, late that night, I got home and found the side door unlocked. That stopped me cold. We used the side door more than the front because it opened into the kitchen from the driveway. I always locked it the second I came in. I even remembered checking it before leaving that afternoon, because the deadbolt used to stick if you did not turn it all the way. But when I put my key in that night, the door opened before I even turned it. I stood there for a few seconds, still outside, looking into the dark kitchen. The dog, Murphy, came trotting over from the living room like normal. Nothing looked wrong. No lights on, no drawers open, no broken glass. I went in anyway and locked the door behind me. Then I checked the whole first floor. Kitchen, living room, my parents' room, bathroom. Nothing. Murphy followed me the entire time, tail wagging, relaxed. That helped a little. If someone had been inside recently, I felt like the dog would have been acting strange. I convinced myself I must have forgotten the lock again. That excuse lasted until I went to my room. At first glance, everything looked fine. Bed unmade, desk messy, clothes on the chair, exactly the way I had left it. Then I noticed my closet door was open. I never left that door open because Murphy liked stealing socks out of the laundry basket in there. I walked over and looked inside. Nothing. Then I looked up. The attic hatch was shifted slightly to one side. Not open, just not seated, flush in the frame the way it should have been. I felt a tightness in my chest. I told myself maybe my dad had gone up there before the trip and did not close it all the way. But I knew that was not true, because I had put a suitcase back in the closet the day before, and I would have noticed it. I got the step stool from the kitchen and climbed up just high enough to push on one side. It moved. A faint line of darkness opened between the panel and the ceiling. Then something on top of it shifted with a soft scrape. I jumped down so fast the stool nearly tipped over. For a few seconds, I just stood there listening. Nothing moved after that. No footsteps above me. No creaking. Just silence. I backed out of the room with Murphy and shut the bedroom door. Then I dragged the chair from my desk and jammed it under the knob. I slept on the couch with all the downstairs lights on and Murphy beside me. I barely slept at all. The next morning, I called my dad and told him everything except the part about the attic. I just said the side door had been unlocked and that something felt off. He asked if anything was missing. I said no. He told me to make sure all the windows were shut and to call my uncle if I wanted someone to stop by. Instead, I felt embarrassed. I was 19, alone for 2 nights, and already scaring myself over an attic hatch and an open shower curtain. So I told him I was probably overthinking it. That afternoon, I did not go into my room at all. Around 5, I left for work, and before leaving, I locked every door and window in the house. I checked each one twice. When I got back that night, the first thing I noticed was the kitchen trash can. The lid was up. It was one of those metal cans with a step pedal. The lid only stayed open if someone had just used it, or if the pedal got stuck. I stared at it for a second, then stepped closer. Inside, right on top, was a yogurt cup. I had not eaten yogurt in weeks. My parents had left some in the fridge, but I knew I had not touched them. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. I went straight to the refrigerator and checked. One of the yogurt cups was gone. The foil top from another one was missing too. My hand started shaking. Someone had been in the house while I was at work, comfortable enough to eat in the kitchen and throw the trash away. Then Murphy started growling. He was standing at the end of the hallway facing my bedroom door, not barking, not moving, just staring at it with his head low and a sound coming out of him I had never heard before. Then there was a thump from inside my room, heavy enough to shake the door once. I grabbed my keys and backed toward the side door. Another thump, then a dragging sound above me, moving from the direction of my room toward the hallway ceiling. The attic space connected all 3 bedrooms. Whoever was up there was moving. I got the side door open, called Murphy, and ran for the car. He bolted out right behind me, still growling. I threw both of us inside, locked the doors, and pulled halfway down the driveway before looking back at the house. For a second, nothing happened. Then the curtain in my bedroom window moved, not blown by air, pulled aside. A man's face appeared in the gap. I only saw him for maybe a second, but it was enough. Pale skin, dark hair, and a blank expression like he had not expected me to look back that quickly. Then he dropped out of sight. I drove straight to my uncle's house and told him everything. He got in his truck, came back with me, and brought 2 of his friends. They checked the house top to bottom. My room was empty. The attic was not. Up there, in the insulation over the hallway, they found a sleeping bag, 2 empty water bottles, food wrappers, and a flashlight. My uncle also found pry marks on the small side window above the garage where the ladder was kept. Whoever it was had likely gotten in through that window, used the ladder to reach the attic hatch in my closet, and stayed hidden whenever I was home. What gets me now is not that he was inside. It is how long he might have been there. Long enough to know the house was empty during the day. Long enough to know I was alone at night. Long enough to open the shower curtain, unlock the side door, eat from our refrigerator, and sit above my bedroom listening while I told myself I was imagining things. I never slept in that house alone again. The apartment I lived in during my second year of college was above an old duplex on the edge of town, and the main reason I rented it was because it was cheap. Everything about it felt temporary. The carpet was thin, the paint in the kitchen was peeling near the sink, and the windows rattled whenever a truck went by on the main road. But it was close to campus. I could afford it, and I figured I would only be there for a year anyway. The building had 2 levels. My apartment was upstairs. The bottom floor had once been a separate unit, but according to the landlord, it had been turned into storage after some plumbing issue years earlier. There was an exterior door on the side of the building that led to that lower level, and there was also a narrow interior door under my stairs that connected to the same space. My landlord told me that inside door stayed locked and that I had no reason to use it. I lived there alone. Most nights I got back from class or work around 6, made something to eat, and spent the rest of the evening in my room with headphones on. It was quiet in a way I liked. Nobody above me, nobody below me. No neighbors on the other side of the wall. Just me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. One night I got home from work, and the apartment smelled faintly like cigarette smoke. Not strong enough to fill the place, just enough that I caught it near the stairs. I stood there for a second trying to place it. I did not smoke. None of my friends smoked. And because the place was detached from the next house over, it was not like it could drift in from another unit. I walked around the apartment looking for some explanation, but it faded after a few minutes. I forgot about it until 2 nights later, when I smelled it again in the exact same spot. This time, I also noticed something else. The little interior door under the stairs was not closed all the way. It was still locked. I checked the knob myself, but instead of sitting flush in the frame, it was open a crack, almost like it had swollen from humidity. I pushed it shut with the side of my foot and heard it click into place. That should have been it. But over the next week, more little things started bothering me. A spoon I was sure I left in the sink would be washed and sitting in the drying rack. A kitchen chair I always kept pushed in would be slightly angled out. One night, the bathroom light was on when I got home, even though I knew I had turned it off. Each thing was small enough on its own that I could explain it away. I was busy, tired, distracted. If you had asked me then whether I actually thought someone was inside my apartment, I would have said no. Then I started hearing the knocking. It did not happen every night. Maybe 3 times in 1 week, always after midnight. 3 light knocks from somewhere below me, spaced evenly, almost polite. The first time, I assumed it was coming from outside. The second time, I muted the TV and realized it was coming from the stairwell. Not upstairs. Not at my front door. From the locked door under the stairs. I sat there on the couch, staring at it, waiting for another sound. Nothing came. The next morning, I called my landlord and asked if anyone had been in the lower level for repairs. He said no. I told him about the smell and the knocking. He laughed a little and said old buildings made weird sounds when the weather changed. Then he added that the outside storage door sometimes blew open if it was not latched hard enough, and that maybe an animal had gotten in. The real turning point came on a Thursday. I got home from class earlier than usual, around 2 in the afternoon. The second I opened my apartment door, I could tell somebody had been there. The air felt warmer. That was the first thing. The second was that I could hear water running, just barely. A thin, steady trickling sound from somewhere below me. I stood in the kitchen listening for a full 10 seconds before I moved. Then I went to the stairwell and stared at the door under the stairs. This time, it was definitely open. Only an inch, maybe less, but enough that I could see darkness in the gap. I remember saying, "Hello?" like an idiot, as if there was any normal person who should have answered from down there. The water kept running. Then it stopped. Right after that, something scraped against the concrete below me. I backed away from the door so fast I hit the wall behind me. A few seconds later, the knob moved. Slowly. Not rattling. Just turning as far as the lock would let it. Then easing back into place. I grabbed my keys, went outside, and called the landlord again from my car. This time he sounded annoyed more than concerned. He said he was at least 40 minutes away and told me not to open the door. While I was still in the car, I watched the side of the building. After maybe 5 minutes, the exterior door to the lower level opened. A man stepped out. He looked to be in his 40s, wearing jeans, a dark sweatshirt, and a knit cap. He had a plastic grocery bag in one hand. He did not look surprised to be seen. He just paused, looked directly at my car, then shut the door behind him and walked around the back of the building toward the alley. I stayed there for a second, trying to process what I had just seen. Then I started the car and followed him. Only for half a block. He cut through the alley behind the laundromat, and by the time I turned in after him, he was gone. There was nobody there but a dumpster and 2 parked vans. I drove straight to campus and stayed there until my landlord finally called me back. When he got to the building and checked the lower level, he told me over the phone that it was empty. I asked him if he was serious, He said there was evidence someone had been staying there, but the man was gone. There were blankets, food wrappers, empty bottles, and one of those battery lanterns sitting on a crate. He also found that the inside lock on my stairwell door had been shaved down enough that it could be worked loose from below if you knew how to do it. That should have been enough for me to move out immediately. I wish I had. Instead, I stayed another 4 nights because my landlord promised to replace the lock and board up the outer door. He changed the lock that same evening, and for one whole day, I almost convinced myself it was over. Then I came home Friday night and found a note on my kitchen table. It was written on the back of one of my class handouts. It said, "You got my room locked." I still remember every detail of how that looked. My own paper, my own apartment, my own pen from the cup on the desk. I did not look around after that. I did not check the bathroom, or the bedroom, or the stairwell. I just grabbed my backpack, backed out of the apartment, locked the door, and drove to my friend Nolan's house. When my landlord came the next morning, he found the note still there, but nothing else disturbed. He swore the lower level was secured and empty. I never spent another night in that place. What bothers me now is not just that someone had been living underneath me. It is how close our routines must have come to overlapping. He knew what papers were mine. He knew where I kept pens. He knew when I was gone long enough for him to come upstairs without rushing. And every time I think about those polite little knocks from under the stairs, I realize they probably were not random at all. He was not trying to get out. He was letting me know he was there. The first sign was the wet towel. I noticed it hanging over the edge of the laundry basket in the hallway, and for a second, I just stood there looking at it, trying to remember whether I had left it like that before going to work. I was 20 at the time, and living with my parents in a split-level house outside town. They had gone to stay with my grandparents for 3 nights because my grandfather had just come home from the hospital. I stayed behind because I had classes during the day and a closing shift at a grocery store that week. It was the first time I had the place to myself for more than 1 night, and I actually liked it. The house was quiet. I could leave the TV on as late as I wanted, and there was nobody around to notice if I ate cereal for dinner. The layout mattered. You came in through the front door into a short landing. A half flight of stairs went up to the living room, kitchen, and bedrooms. Another half flight went down to a den, a small bathroom, and the laundry room that connected to the garage. The laundry room had a solid wood door that always stuck in the frame during humid weather, so we usually left it slightly open unless someone was running the washer. The first night alone was normal. I got home around 10, locked the front door and the garage entry, fed the cat, watched something in the living room, and went to bed. The second day was normal too. I went to class, came back in the afternoon, changed, and left for work again. Nothing felt off. That second night, I came home a little after 11:30. The downstairs hall light was on. I knew I had turned it off before I left. I remember doing it because the bulb in that fixture was too bright, and I hated seeing it from the top of the stairs when the rest of the house was dark. Still, I told myself I was tired and must have forgotten. I switched it off, went upstairs, and did not think about it again until the next afternoon. That was when I saw the towel. It was one of ours, a blue one from the upstairs bathroom set, damp enough that the fabric had darkened in spots. I touched it and felt how cold it was. Not freshly used, but not something that had been sitting there for days either. I took it upstairs and checked both bathrooms. The towel bar in the upstairs one was empty on one side. That should have settled it, but it did not, because I knew I had used a white towel that morning before class. I had left it hanging over the shower rod to dry because nobody else was home. The white towel was still there. So where had the blue one come from? I told myself maybe I had pulled it from the linen closet without thinking after my shower the night before. That was not impossible. The problem was that the more I tried to explain it, the more details I noticed that did not fit. The soap in the downstairs bathroom sink was wet. The toilet lid was up. The little trash can in there, which had been empty when my parents left, now had a crumpled paper towel in it. I stopped moving and just listened. The house was silent. Then, from downstairs, I heard a soft click. Not from outside, from inside the lower level. I looked toward the stairwell and held my breath. A second later came a short scraping sound, like something lightly dragging across the tile in the laundry room. I went cold immediately. I should have left then. I know that now. Instead, I grabbed the fireplace poker from beside the living room hearth and walked to the top of the stairs. The lower level was dim because I had turned the hall light back on without thinking. From there, I could see the den couch, the edge of the bathroom door, and part of the laundry room doorway at the end of the short hall. Nothing moved. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Then Murphy, our cat, came out from under the den coffee table and stared straight at the laundry room. His back was low, ears flattened, tail puffed up bigger than I had ever seen it. That scared me more than any sound. I took one step down. Then I heard breathing. Faint, but definitely there, from behind the laundry room door. Not loud enough to sound deliberate. Just the kind of breath somebody lets out when they are trying very hard to stay quiet. I backed up the stairs so fast I nearly slipped. Once I got to the top, I shut the door to the lower level and slid the deadbolt across. We almost never used that lock because it only locked from the upper hallway side. I stood there with the poker in my hand, staring at the door, waiting for it to move. Nothing happened. After about 30 seconds, I called my dad. He answered on the third ring, and I told him there was someone in the house. Not outside. Inside, downstairs. He did not ask if I was sure. He just told me to take the cat, get out the front door, go to the car, and wait at the end of the street until he called me back. I did exactly that. I left everything else behind, even my backpack and shoes. I shoved Murphy into his carrier from the hall closet because it was the only way I could get him out with me, locked the front door from outside, and drove to the church parking lot at the corner. My dad called maybe 20 minutes later and told me my uncle had gone to the house with him. He said they had checked downstairs and found nobody. He asked me to come back. I almost refused. But when I got there, both of their trucks were in the driveway, and every light in the house was on. So I went in. The lower level looked normal at first glance. Then my uncle opened the laundry room door all the way and pointed to the floor near the washing machine. There was a sleeping bag in the narrow space between the machine and the wall. Not rolled up. Laid flat, like someone had gotten off it in a hurry. Next to it were 2 empty bottles of water, a bag of crackers, and one of my mother's small sewing scissors. The back garage door was still locked. The little window above the dryer was not. My uncle showed us the marks on the outer frame where the screen had been pried away. It was a high window, too small for someone broad to fit through easily, but big enough if they were thin and willing to force it. What made it even worse was what they found in the den closet. 3 folded shirts that did not belong to anyone in our family. Whoever had been there had not just entered the house. He had been staying in it, long enough to use our towels, our bathroom, and our laundry room, as if it were his own private room whenever the house was empty. My dad asked why I had not noticed sooner, and the answer was simple. The lower level was easy to ignore. I used the upstairs bathroom. I hardly ever went into the den when I was alone. If someone knew my schedule, he could stay downstairs all day, come out when I was gone, and be back in the laundry room before I got home. That was the part that stayed with me. Not that there had been a stranger in the house, that he had chosen a part of it I barely used, and lived there in the blind spot of my routine, close enough to hear me come home every night, close enough to wait behind one thin door while I stood at the top of the stairs, trying to decide whether I was imagining things. Afterward, I kept hearing that breath every time I passed downstairs there.